Stacy woke up to the rusty tune of a nursery rhyme she had never heard before, inside a wooden hut she had never seen. She quickly realized she was standing but could not move on her own. This forced her eyes to dart back and forth in order to make out the portion of the room she could see. The things that caught Stacy's attention were the shelves that lined the walls from the floor to the ceiling. Each shelf was filled with countless severed heads looking up with their mouths wide open, all sitting on their necks. A boiling cauldron sat in front of Stacy that gave off an aroma. It reminded her of something her mother made when she would get sick. Tears filled her eyes as she felt a leathery hand brush against her shoulder before coming into view. The creature stood in front of the cauldron with its back facing her as it hummed the rhyme she heard when she had awoken. It looked like a little girl, but it had the skin of an elderly woman. It stood there naked with its slack skin and wiry hair. The creepy crone dipped its disgusting finger into the boiling concoction, then tasted it.
Excuse me? Have you seen Laura?
Stacy asked with a trembling voice. The creature in front of her turned around and she immediately burst into tears. It looked like a very old witch who was no taller than herself. Its chest hung below the waist, but had no genitals. The crone's face lacked any symmetry as the rotting remains of a familiar face fell to the floor in a slop. It spoke in rhyme with its raspy voice.
Oh, sweetie, don't you see? Laura's here, you silly bee.
With the last word, Stacy saw its true face. The eyes were offset with one bigger than the other, and it had nothing but a hole where the nose should be. Its mouth had several rows of teeth of all different shapes and sizes that seemingly went all the way down its throat. Stacy screamed because that was all she could do, and the crone flicked the air with its long, slender tongue as if it could taste her fear. It cackled before speaking again.
Try and try. That's all you can do. The more you struggle, the more delicious the brew. Let me show you what I do. My soup tells the stories of all before you.
The creature walked to shelves and plucked a head like a grail without a thought. It walked back over to Stacy, holding the head by the neck with one hand and letting the back of the head rest in the other. It smiled with its many teeth while holding a little boy's head that had a thick liquid sitting in its mouth.
Oh, Jimmy was a whole lot of fun. Jimmy had Billy, and his brother had none. Jimmy loved Billy, but Billy was a thought. Jimmy was real, and Billy was not.
Stacy's head jerked back all on its own. Shortly after, her mouth opened wide when the last word of the rhyme left the creature's mouth. It touched the severed head's chin to hers and poured the liquid into her mouth. The warm touch was revolting on its own, but the thick liquid slugging down her throat with ease made her feel ashamed because it tasted delicious. Her blue eyes rolled back to show another set of brown irises missing their pupils. It forced her to see through the eyes of another in a small, dark place. Yet, she was still not able to move. She could hear a door open with a young man's voice following. "Jimmy, it's time for dinner." There was a pause before the young man spoke again, and then yelled to their mother. "Dude, where the fuck are you?" "Mom, I can't find him. He's probably being weird again." Footsteps trailed off and Stacy began to move, but not by her own doing. A vertical string of light blinded her vision. When it cleared, she saw that she was no longer in the hut. She was in the bathroom cabinet. Stacy reached out of the small space to pull herself out. Her eyes fell on arms that were not hers, nor was she anywhere she recognized. The body Stacy was in stood up on its own. She was much taller than what she was used to. Stacy turned around to see a little boy in the mirror grinning from ear to ear. That's when she realized she was no longer herself, but a child the creature had disguised itself as.
Jimmy, time for dinner!
Yelled the boy's mother from the kitchen. Jimmy's head snapped to the side to yell back in the little boy's voice.
Be right there, Mom!
He ran to the kitchen and jumped into a seat right next to the young man he had heard earlier.
How's playing hide and seek?
Pestered the young man. The boy's mother answered before he did.
Stephen, be nice and eat your food.
His head turned to Stephen.
As a matter of fact, I did. You can play with us later if you like.
Stephen just started eating without giving an answer. Their mother and Jimmy joined in, and dinner seemed to go on just like any other night. It didn't take long for Jimmy to finish up first and excused himself from the table. Stacy watched from Jimmy's eyes as his body made its way to the sink with a plate in hand before slamming it into the sink. The plate shattered into pieces, startling the boy's mother and brother. Their mother yelled in surprise.
What the hell, Jimmy? Get out of there and just go to your room.
Stephen got up to clean up the mess while Jimmy ran into a room and slammed the door. Jimmy scanned the room to see he was in an older boy's room, then went into the closet and closed the door. Stacy felt herself stand motionless and without a breath for a couple hours until Stephen was getting ready for bed. Stephen jumped in bed, turning on the TV. Shortly after, he heard Jimmy reach out to him from the closet.
Stephen, want to come play hide and seek with Billy and me?
Stephen's head shot in the direction of his closet with fear and confusion. He slowly got out of his bed, calling out.
Jimmy? Dude, what the fuck are you doing in there? I'm going to tell Mom if you don't get out.
Stacy could hear their mother calling for Jimmy from his own room, and she could see how uncomfortable it made Stephen. Stephen went to yell out to her when the closet door slightly opened on its own. He ran over to yell into the open door, only to be confused more than ever.
Dude, what the hell are you?
He was dumbfounded at the sight, making his voice trail off. He saw his brother was standing in his closet, but inside wasn't what it was supposed to be. Stephen was watching Jimmy hide behind a tree in a forest that shouldn't exist. Stacy did everything she could to warn him, but all she could do was watch from the eyes of the body she had no control of. Stacy watched as the body waved at Stephen, then called him over.
Come play hide and seek with us. This is where Billy lives.
Stephen stepped closer to the door.
I don't know, Jimmy. Is it safe? Does Mom know about this?
Jimmy made his way to the doorway. He extended a hand to comfort him.
Of course it's safe. Don't you trust me?
Stacy was screaming inside for him to run, but it was a fruitless effort. Stephen hesitantly reached out his hand until Jimmy violently snatched him by the waist.
Come in, brother. Don't you want to play? This is only the start of your dismay.
Stephen looked down at Jimmy's hand in fear and frustration. He yanked his arm free before kicking Jimmy away, then stepped back in horror. It was then when he realized his brother's body, the body Stacy was forced to witness the horror from, was slowly falling apart in a slop on the ground. The body she was in ran at Stephen with the disguise of his brother melting away and pounced on him. Stephen's scream turned into a whimpering gargle when a chunk was ripped out of his neck. The body of Jimmy crawled over to Stephen's back as he panicked to hold his neck closed. With hands planted firmly on the floor, Jimmy kicked Stephen into the closet, with the door shutting behind him on its own. Stephen was gone, and one would think the nightmare was finally over. That was until the bedroom door opened up with a trembling voice behind it.
Stephen? Honey?
The boy's mother opened the door to see a figure facing the closed closet door. It was still wearing Jimmy's clothes, but there sat a puddle of slop at the feet that gave off a pleasant aroma. The boy's mother started to take notice that it looked a little shorter than her son, and that its hair was a little longer in some places. It was when she noticed the length of the arms that made her shudder with fear. Bravely, the boy's mother stood her ground at the horrific sight and demanded to know.
Where the fuck are my babies? What did you do to them?
Their mother reached for the closet thing without taking her eyes off the monstrosity who was still facing the closet. She grabbed Stephen's skateboard, then closed the distance between her and the monstrosity, with her legs shaking uncontrollably with each step. She stood behind the thing disguised as her little boy with the skateboard over her head, and then it spoke.
Your babies? Your babies? These ingredients were mine for the taking. Each one is special for the soups I'll be making.
It said this as its head spun completely around to look at the mother in the eyes with its true face. The mother went to scream, but no sound left her mouth. It grabbed her by her bottom jaw with such force that its fingers ripped through with ease. The mother immediately let go of the skateboard and grabbed it by its slick forearm to pry it off, but it was a fruitless endeavor. The body of the monster bent back at the knees, caught itself with its free hand, then opened the door with its foot while staring into the eyes of the boy's petrified mother. The mother gazed into the forest that replaced the inside of the closet. It would be the last thing she witnessed before being violently dragged into the creature's domain by her bottom jaw, with the door slamming behind her. As the scene came to a dark end, Stacy found that she was able to open her eyes again, and she was back in the hut. She began to cry hysterically. The creature stood in front of Stacy, clapping jubilantly, while its long, slender tongue slapped away the tears running down her face. The creature cackled as it walked back to the wall of heads and found another it seemed to be fond of. It grabbed the head from the shelf and cradled it. It was a middle-aged woman's head that the creature held in its arms like a baby, with the head's long blonde hair swishing with the motion of each step it took. All the while, the liquid stood motionless in its mouth without making a ripple as it did. The disgusting creature stood before Stacy for a while as she wept and struggled to move, screaming,
I want my mommy and daddy. Please don't eat me.
The creature placed its long, wrinkly finger on Stacy's forehead, ran it down her face, then booped her on the nose, making her quiver. Stacy's head violently jerked back once again, with the creature holding the severed head above. It cackled as it poured the liquid down her throat while rhyming.
Todd was so lonely until he met Sally, but not before Sussy, Taylor, and Allie. Todd tried to ignore us with his glasses of brandy, but it didn't take too long for things to end badly.
Stacy's eyes rolled back for a second time and her irises were replaced by a hazel pair, missing the pupil like before. Once again, she was thrust into a body that she had no control of, and was in a dark place she didn't know. A knock was heard, followed by an answer.
Girls, I can't play right now. I need to finish the next few chapters before...
The older gentleman talking was cut off by a few more knocks coming from the space she was in. She heard his voice once more.
Okay, who is it this time? Taylor? Allie?
Stacy watched the light, a thin line overhead cut through the darkness, to see a man looking down at her, or at least the body she was in. He was a fit older man typing on a computer, couldn't be older than 30, but his receding hairline would put that to question. The man was sitting at his desk wearing basketball shorts, a dingy tank top, and gave off a strong stench every time he opened his mouth.
Sally, how you doing, baby? I see that you missed me, but give me like 20 minutes and I'm all yours.
The body Stacy was occupying extended its arm, reaching into the leg of the man's shorts while whining.
But Todd, you promised.
The girls and I have been waiting oh so patiently. Todd shooed the hand away with his before slurring his words.
Oh, come on. You know I can't write when you ladies mess with me like that.
That's when Stacy realized that the woman she was seeing through was in a desk drawer. The woman pulled back her hand and playfully argued.
You told Taylor that last night. Please. You promised, remember?
Todd took a swig of a bottle sitting next to his computer and laughed.
I know. Really, though, I'm almost done. I promise this time. It'll be worth the wait.
The body giggled like a schoolgirl before responding.
We know, but we're so tired of waiting to taste you. You and your delicious-looking self.
Todd's beet-red face seemed to blush.
You know how to win me over, don't you? Your place this time, right?
The woman nodded with excitement, reaching out of the drawer to caress Todd's leg, giving him goosebumps. The body sat in the drawer unblinking until Todd finished up what he was doing. He stood up from his chair with a sway before looking down at the drawer with the body looking back at him. He smiled, then finally asked,
So, how are we doing this? Do I just step in there or something?
The body, occupied by Stacy, reached out with both hands excitedly saying,
Yes. Take my hands and I'll help you right in, baby. The girls and I have been waiting far too long to make you mine.
The words didn't register until Todd had already mindlessly placed his hands in the others before he jokingly asked,
Mine? Thought you guys weren't sharing me. Don't want to make any of the other ladies jealous.
Stacy watched Todd's face grow in horror. He tried to pull away when Stacy smiled at him with a mouth full of teeth she shouldn't have.
Oh, Toddy boy, you think you're a catch. Not one, not two, but 4 to be exact. It took until Sally for me to find you a match. I cannot promise to bring you home without a scratch.
Todd screamed in horror as he struggled to pull himself free. The arm of Stacy's body started to rip at the elbow the harder he pulled. He put his foot up against the drawer and tried to pull himself free with all his might. Stacy let out a rusty cackle while he cried,
Once you run.
Let go! Let the fuck go of me!
The skin continued to tear at the elbow, while Todd yanked the rest of the body from inside the disguise, leaving whatever remained of the skin suit hanging loosely on the drawer. Stacy and her newly mutilated body landed on him with a coat of a light viscous, that gave off a savory smell. Todd cried, trying to get a grip on the little monster, but it was far too slick for his hands. Stacy watched the long, slender tongue leave her mouth to force itself into one of his nostrils, out the other, and into his mouth. Todd wrapped his hands around the throat of his attacker while he gagged on the tongue. Then Stacy felt the body go limp, giving Todd a moment to collect himself before everything went black. Todd pulled the tongue out from down his throat and gasped for air once he was free. He pushed the body off of him, then started pulling the tongue out of his nose, but the pain was too much. Todd got to his feet and walked over to his desk to look for something sharp to free himself from the tongue that dangled from his nostrils. He gagged at the sight of the skin the body had left behind hanging on the drawer that seemed to be turning into some sort of liquid by the second. Todd searched for his letter opener on the messy desk in a panic.
Come on, where the hell is it?
He used his arm to clear his desk in anger, then held himself up on the edge with his hands. He dropped his head and began to sob.
What the fuck is going on? I have to call the police or something. This is too much.
His words were cut short once he felt pressure in his nose. His body jerked back and spun to the side as the slick tongue wrapped around his face in the same direction. The wicked body Stacy occupied was quick, and before he knew it, his head slammed against the desk drawer as it crawled back inside. Todd placed his hands against the drawer, giving everything he could to pull away from the tongue that was now wrapped around his head. A wicked cackle had started to speak, unfazed by the tongue that was wrapped around Todd's head.
Oh, Toddy boy, you really thought you knew. Sad to think that strangulation was new. Well, I'm sorry to say you're sadly mistaken. We'll be in my place once you've awakened.
Todd's neck snapped, and his body went limp with his head in the drawer. He let out muffled groans while his body was taken into the drawer, inch by inch, until it was no more. Stacy's vision came back, and she was in the hut with the creature nowhere to be seen. She broke into a hysterical sob once more, trying to move, but she was still bound where she stood. The creature lowered itself from the ceiling, placing its slick cheek against hers. Her body quivered while she begged.
Where am I? Please, just take me home.
The creature was inverted and face to face with her. It cackled while catching her tears in the empty space where its nose should be.
Stacy, dear, with this much fear, it's only a matter of time until we have enough tears.
Like that, the creature disappeared from view. It shot across the ceiling of the hut on all fours towards a wall of heads. The creature then playfully dropped from the ceiling onto its head, then brought its legs down in front of it before standing up straight. It joyfully picked a head from the wall and presented it to Stacy like a prize. Stacy screamed at the head as it was brought to her.
What did you do to Laura?
The creature cackled as it spun back and forth while approaching Stacy with her best friend's head in hand. It stopped in front of her and gave a twirl before it spoke.
You inviting Laura over with a group of girls was ideal. Little girls have so much fear. I couldn't help but hear you all squeal.
Stacy's mouth opened on its own as the creature scooped some of the liquid from inside the severed head's mouth. It wiped its fingers on her tongue, making her eyes tear in disgust and fear. Stacy's eyes rolled back and were replaced with green irises without pupils, only to awaken in the dark once more. She heard a familiar voice call out.
You can come out now, Laura. I already tagged Jessica.
Stacy watched a small door open up and quickly realized she was in her kitchen. Excited that the nightmare was over, she went to step out of the cabinet, but she still wasn't in control of her body. She remembered that very moment making her grow ill at the thought of what was to come. Her body stepped out of the cabinet and she heard a slap followed by her own voice.
You're it!
And realized it was Laura's voice she was speaking with.
Oh, no fair!
Stacy jumped off the counter and helped her get to her feet. Shortly after, 2 other girls, Jessica and Kelly, ran into the kitchen from different rooms to start the game again. Stacy put on her serious face, then said,
Only rules in this house are no peeking and no backyard, since my parents don't know how to not cheat. Oh, and you're it!
The 3 girls scrambled and left Laura alone in the kitchen to count all on her own. She put her head down on the counter and started to count.
1 is for me, 2 to subdue, 3 is a party,
4 will turn blue,
5 fingers make it hearty, 6 lashes from a few.
Hide all you want because I'm coming for you.
Laura picked up her head from the counter, sniffed the air, and smiled. She stood there motionless without blinking for what felt like forever before crawling back into the cabinet and shutting the door. She inched her smiling face forward in the dark compartment until her cheek touched Kelly's face. Kelly kicked the door open, screaming, and ran out from the closet under the stairs. Stacy and Jessica ran to her crying as quickly as they could. Kelly shook her head while pointing at Laura, who watched from the doorway of the closet.
She was just there. I don't want to play with her anymore.
Stacy started to remember this moment. She remembered saying,
What the heck, Laura? You aren't supposed to scare us. You're supposed to find us.
But she was not herself. She was the creature disguised as Laura in her own house. Her smile drooped into an uncomfortably long frown, saying,
I'm so sorry. I won't do it again. I'll even be it again.
Stacy's parents opened the back door to check on them with her dad calling out, You girls okay? Can't tell if you're screaming and having fun or seriously freaking out. Kelly yelled back at Stacy's parents.
We're fine, Mr. Jacobson. Just scared myself. But thank you for checking.
Stacy hugged Kelly.
Thank you. Cool, so we get to keep playing. Laura, you're it.
The 3 girls ran off in different directions. Laura moseyed over to the counter and put her head down with drool pouring from her mouth. She rested her head there for a few minutes, stood up and sniffed the air like before. She walked upstairs and stopped in front of a closet. She giggled and just walked past the closet and into Stacy's room. She then crouched down next to Stacy's bed and opened the nightstand cabinet drawer. She pretended to be really surprised.
Oh my gosh, no way this is real. Jessica, you didn't tell me she had one of these.
Jessica was laying under the bed, confused, then remembered Stacy's strategy tricking people out of their hiding place. So Laura continued.
Jessica, I know you're under the bed. Are you telling me you didn't know Stacy had little horses in her nightstand? This is so cool.
Jessica was confused more than ever when she heard the sounds of galloping horses coming from the side of the bed. She could not help the urge to look at what Laura was trying to show her. Laura waved for Jessica to come closer from under the bed, telling her,
Come on, you have to look real close.
Hurry before they run off.
Jessica pulled herself from under the bed to look inside the nightstand that appeared to be pitch black.
Where did it go?" she asked, looking over at Laura in confusion. Stacy watched Jessica's heart sink into her stomach when she saw Laura staring back at her with saliva pouring down from the corner of her smile. Jessica slowly got to her feet, backing away towards the bedroom door. Laura stood up, cackling.
Go ahead, run away, and try to live another day.
Jessica turned to run out of the room. She went to scream, but a hand covered her mouth, yanking her back. She kicked and let out a muffled cry, trying to get free, but she couldn't keep Laura from dragging her back to the nightstand. Laura lowered her head next to Jessica's and licked the tears from her face, making her cry even more.
A tasty soup you will be. Can't wait to wear your flavor on me.
She grabbed Jessica by the waist of her pants while gripping her mouth shut. Jessica was thrown headfirst into the nightstand, with the door shutting behind her. Laura opened the nightstand back up, crawled in, and shut the door. Stacy, still within Laura's body, could hear Kelly breathing heavily below her, so she knocked. Kelly cut her breath short and listened for a moment. Laura gave another knock from above. Curious, Kelly opened the kitchen cabinet she was hiding in to look up and to see nothing. Kelly stepped out, looking on and around the counter, only to see there was no one around to mess with her. She shrugged it off, then went to step back into her hiding spot until she heard Laura knock again. It seemed to come from inside the drawer above the cabinet she was hiding in. Her curiosity got the best of her once again. She opened the drawer that should have had utensils in it, to see nothing but black. Kelly closed it to take a second to register what she just saw because it didn't make any sense to her. Then opened it up to look again. Kelly opened the drawer to find a pair of small hands shooting out at her. They were Laura's hands. She grabbed onto the back of her head as she fought to break free, and all she heard was laughter. She went to scream for help, but the hands pulled her head into the drawer, putting pressure on her throat, making her choke. Kelly kicked her legs until they went limp before she was dragged into the drawer. Stacy ran into the kitchen to see that Laura was holding Kelly's slippers. "What happened? Everything okay?" Stacy felt the face of Laura contort to force a confused look. I don't know. I was chasing her, then she just crawled in the cabinet and disappeared." Stacy gave an incredulous look, so Laura showed her. She opened up the cabinet door and gasped in amazement. "Look at all the pretty flowers! Come on, let's check it out!"
But Kelly is there?
Laura crawled in without hesitation, with her voice trailing away the deeper she went into the drawer. Stacy was blown away when she looked into the drawer and couldn't believe it was real. "What the heck? No way! I have to show my mom and dad all these flowers!" Laura called out to her from inside the drawer.
Don't worry about that, silly bee. The only friend you'll need is me.
Stacy giggled and said, "You're so silly." Stacy then entered the drawer with it sliding shut behind her. She then understood how the creature tricked her, her friends, and all those people into becoming its next meal. And there was nothing she could do about it except to watch it all happen. And like that, Stacy was back in the hut, drenched in sweat and tears, with the creature's back facing her. It was stirring the cauldron with its nasty arm. Stacy cried for the last time as her body made its way to the side of the cauldron on its own and stepped in. She could feel the boiling broth start to scald her body as it sat down on its own. The creature cackled, then spoke for the last time before Stacy was to join the many heads along the walls.
Think too hard, and you'll see me in the closet. Think too hard, and you'll see me in the drawer.
You won't get too far once you see me in the cabinet.
You won't get too far once you run for the door. Won't take too long for my body to rot. Won't take too long till my soup's on the floor.